welcome to this edition of We the People. I'm Shane Del Cohen, your host, and I would like to introduce y'all to Bendie Mason from the Climate Cafe.
Yes.
What's the Climate Cafe?
The Climate Change Cafe
Go ahead.
is a process to harvest group intelligence. It's based on a process called the World Cafe, but in this case we decided to make climate change the issue that we were going to discuss.
That leads us down about 13 different paths.
That's correct.
All right, let's back up and start with World Cafe.
Okay. World Cafe was developed about 13 years ago in California, and it was a way to convene a group of diverse people to discuss questions that were important. And they developed a method that enabled anywhere from 12 to thousands of people to participate at the same time, discussing whatever question was important, whether it's big business or government or a village in Africa or the Girl Scouts of America or in Reno, our Climate Change Cafe. And you work at small cafe-like tables. There are about 4 people per table. You walk in and it's a welcoming space. There are flowers, there's tablecloths, there's colored markers, there's white drawing paper on the table, there's food, there's music. It's meant to be a welcoming space. It's in total opposition to how we usually take information. Usually at a convention or for business, you walk into a room, there's someone on stage, they tell you what they want you to know, you walk out. A Climate Cafe is developed so that all the diverse people that are involved in that question get to work together at the same table. So for example, in Singapore, they use the World Cafe model for the police force. And here were all these policemen walking in full policemen's outfits at these little tables with pretty colors and flowers, and they sat down along with the administration, along with some government officials, along with the storekeepers, along with just people from the street. And they dealt with questions that were important to them. I don't know what those questions were. And by the end of it, because you're getting feedback from the kid at the corner who walks home from school, to the administrator who deals with the problems he has to deal with, to the policeman, you're getting all this different feedback. And the method of then harvesting the intelligence, whoever's the moderator will go from table to table and say, what came to the surface for you? At the same time, there's a graphic recorder standing by the wall. The whole wall's covered with paper. Not all the time, but more often than not, it's used in World Cafes. And she's listening, and she's graphing the discussion. So by the end of the day, you've got an artistic graphic representation of what happened in that room. So whoever wasn't in that room gets to see that. They have found that whatever policies come out of these cafes or new directions in companies, that everyone's a lot more invested in the result. Everyone's more willing to change the policy because it came from the bottom up. Instead of being told what to do, it came from where the real life happens. And everybody was involved, and there's a total respect for, we had kids at the Climate Change Cafe this week, and little ones, and their input was as important, if not more important, than the government officials sitting at the table with them. So
Okay, well, you've skipped.
I
We've
know,
gone
I do
from
that.
that's
I'm
all
sorry.
right. No problem. I just want people to really feel engaged.
Yes,
in part of
yes,
this.
yes.
We've gone from this sort of world movement, which we'll
Yes.
get back to,
Yes.
to it's actually happening in Reno.
Right.
Okay.
How?
How, what, where, when, why?
I've been part of a group called the Nevada Coalition for Climate Protection for almost a year. And we wanted to do something this year, and we weren't sure what we wanted to do. We had given out light bulbs at Earth Day in the past. We'd gone in front of the city council and encouraged people to be more green and the city to be more green and let our voices be heard. But this year we didn't know what we were going to do. I went to Nevada City. A friend of mine was putting on a Climate Change Cafe. I'd never heard of it. I didn't hear of World Cafe. And I walked into a room, and it was pretty flowers and nice music and very welcoming, et cetera, and I went through this process. And 3 hours later, I left so inspired and so instead of feeling total despair, which I can often go to in this world that we live in today, I felt like it was possible to make change. And not only possible, it was fun. And not only fun, it wasn't going to be a big deal lifestyle change for me, because the people at that cafe, some groups got formed. Some high school kids went back to their high school and changed. They didn't want chemicals to be used in cleaning. They wanted recycling. So they connected with an adult mentor at this cafe, and they proceeded to take action. There was one woman that came, she decided, I want to make a change. So she became a clown, and she goes to kindergarten classes, and she trips and falls, and her bags fall all over the floor, and she has kids help pick up stuff and recycle it. This goes here, this goes here, this goes here. Other kids formed a garden. You never know what's going to come out until the people in that moment of time sit down at the tables together, which is kind of exciting. So I brought the idea back and I said, do you want to do this? And they said yes, and that was in September. In November, we held a meeting at the Sierra Arts Gallery and attracted about 35 people, and basically told them what the World Cafe was, told them what the Climate Change Cafe was, talked to them about a book called Blessed Unrest by a gentleman named Paul Hawken, who talks about movements all over the planet, grassroots kind of movements. And everybody raised their hand at the end of that meeting when I said, would you like to bring this to Reno? Because I was a little nervous. I didn't know if, you know, they've done it in Berkeley, California. They've done it in Woodstock, New York. They've done it in places that were pretty cutting edge, and I was a little nervous about bringing the process to Reno, but everybody said do it, and we did it. And so we did it on Saturday and put on our first Reno Cafe.
And it was a tremendous success.
I think so. There were about 67 people there. People seemed to enjoy themselves. They seemed to be engaged. Every table had conversation. There were a number of different age groups there. There were people who worked for the Water Commission. There were people from the Sierra Club. There were people who do sustainability. There were people who've never done anything but were curious, what is this? And they showed up. There were two women that were walking by the river, saw the sign, came in, had a brownie, a cup of tea, and left. So,
but you may have changed their climate, and you focused on climate change.
Totally.
And it was to look at
for example, the first question, we wanted people to have an opportunity to share their despair, to share their fear, to share what keeps you from taking action. Because I was so discouraged and filled with despair, why would I do anything? My daughter a year ago, well, what are you doing? Do you know, I mean, all you have to do is jump on the plane and go to New York once and you're going to erase all the good that you did all year. And this kind of negative way of looking at it. So we felt we needed to give people an opportunity to recognize that inside themselves, to speak it, to hear it at a group, and at least put it out there so that we can then move on. So from that position of let's share our fear and our despair, the next question is, well, what do you see good that's happening? You know, and you start to move it from a negative perspective to a more positive perspective. And by the end, we had focus groups broken out. People were brainstorming on the food situation, government situation, recycling, communal living, all different things that came out of this particular cafe at this particular point in time. And there's a second cafe on May 10th, and it's a series. So we're going to be doing different things and just building on the theme of the first one. What makes it really cool is that if you didn't come to the first one,
that's okay.
You can come to the second one because all the graphics are there. You can catch up like this, what the group process was that you missed. So, and we only have 2 scheduled at this point in time.
But you said you were concerned that Reno may not have been as cutting edge as some other communities.
I'm from Manhattan, you have to forgive me.
That's okay.
And when I moved here, it was very different than what I was used to. And Manhattan is known as an intellectual community. Nevada City, California is known as an intellectual community. That's not what Reno's known for. So I was nervous to bring such an intellectual process here.
And what did you find?
Everyone was great.
See?
People are people are people are people, you know.
And the whole cafe concept, doesn't that harken back to another time in history all over the world where people would gather?
Yes. we've lost the fine art of conversation. One of the things of the cafe I introduced is in cultures throughout history, there's been this concept of a talking stick. That when you hold the stick, you're it, and nobody interrupts. So I sat at home all last week and I painted rocks. And we had the most beautiful colored shiny rocks on each table. And we instructed people, when you're speaking, you take the rock and you put it in front of you. That way, if you stop for a breath, nobody's going to interrupt you. And until you put that rock back, you have the floor. And yes, people spoke around campfires. People spoke at their village, you know, at the town hall. And we don't. The internet, though, has chat rooms or blogs or all these things now that not only are we speaking, we're speaking across the planet in real time. And it's creating a network that never existed before.
And you were talking about going from being depressed to being energized or inspired. And you talked about a book that Mr. Hawkins had written.
Yes. I'll show it to you.
Okay.
It's cool. Yes.
But the thing, I think the point that's so important that he makes is that all over the world, there's thousands and thousands of little groups, hopefully now in cafes, who have the same value system, or a lot of the same interests, and maybe a lot of the same questions, all looking for a better world in a sense, on many different levels. And it's all under the radar, shall we say? Because you're depressed sitting here in the Truckee Meadows because you don't know that there's all these groups that are concerned about climate change, for instance.
Not to the degree that actually exists out there. I didn't know that.
And so now you feel a little bit better or a little energized about things you can do or other people can do that are
Absolutely. No matter what you do, people are so afraid of, I'm not going to change my life. I'm not going to buy an electric car. I'm not going to use CFL bulbs. I'm not going to go vegetarian, for goodness sake. I like my hamburgers, you know, and that's fine. But if each person did this much, it would be a whole different world. So you do what you're inspired to do. You do, and that's part of what the cafe brings out in people. It brings out creativity. It brings out inspiration. They call it the magic in the middle, because you've got 4 individuals and they each put their wisdom on the table. But then, after it's on the table, it starts to connect, and you start to make connections, and the web gets woven, and it becomes something totally different, and you do get inspired.
But this is all under the radar of a lot of government action or international press. Now what?
Paul Hawkins speaks about it, and he said, and he's researched it and actually has the names of all of these groups. They're all grassroots groups. They're either with indigenous cultures' rights, conservation issues, those 2 main areas. And he's gathered, there's hundreds of thousands of these groups. And he feels that because they're small, because they're grassroots, because they don't have PR people or this or that, they're all doing their business and changing their part of the world, their community, their business, their all these different little ways. We've woven together, it's the biggest movement that ever existed on the planet Earth. And it has no leader, no ideology, it's not religious, it doesn't have any of the trappings of any movement that's ever happened on the planet before. Interesting stuff. It's just
But it also can renew your faith in mankind.
Absolutely.
That no matter what the political, religious, or business, corporate pushes there are in the world, there's a whole layer of people in the world that wants a different kind of lifestyle.
Very much so. Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. So what do you want the people of the Truckee Meadows to know or do or get involved with?
Well, a couple different things. I want the issue of climate change. I mean, a year ago when I was here, you didn't see magazines or calendars or anything in Reno that was necessarily green. This year, Our Life recently had a green cover and featured everything green. Reno Magazine had a green cover, featured everything green. Our city put out a green calendar, which is fantastic. It lists all the recycling places, all the groups that are currently working towards these ends. So in 1 year, and I think it has a lot to do with Al Gore's movie, the consciousness of climate change is becoming more commonplace. So I want to support that. I want to have people that are involved in different groups or by themselves meet at the table. I think we can share resources. I think this idea of networking and never knowing who's going to supply the missing link or who's going to be the person that will be able to enable you to do what you want to do. So convening that table, I like my life work other than this has a lot to do with gathering groups of people and providing a method where that group walks out feeling unified, on the same page, equal, respectful. So this for me is just another way to do that. And around the issue of climate change, I said I don't have any idea what will happen after the second cafe. If any groups will form, if any individuals will be inspired, or if people will just have gotten to know each other and had a good talk over a cup of coffee. I don't know.
And a brownie.
And homemade. Homemade. We worked really hard.
Well, it's amazing what a little food, a little time out in a wonderful environment can do for people.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Some people's lives are very, very busy. And people really don't have time to think, nor do they have time to discuss, as you've said. So you have a lot of individuals scurrying around with these thoughts in their head and no place to put them. And of course then no energy is sustaining them or making them grow.
I have an idea.
Okay.
Can I jump in?
Sure can.
It's the New Yorker in me. I can't keep my mouth shut. One of the things we offered at the cafe, and I know there was a minister in the audience and different people, was this. If they want to take this cafe idea and bring it back to their business and deal with how to make their business more green, bring it back to their church and just have your congregation meet in the exact same atmosphere, possibly over the same questions that we did at the main cafe, but then you're down into your own community.
Right.
And so the issues are different, the people are different, and what you're capable of, because you're already a community, you're already a congregation, or you're already a business, or you're already a Sierra Club, a club. When you bring the World Cafe into these places, then you can start making more of a difference in that way. With little, and our group has discussed the possibility of helping people through that process. Now that we've done it and see how it goes, we'd like to help people do that back wherever they'd like to bring this to.
And as you said, there's so many communities that could do that. I mean, there
Absolutely.
are neighborhoods that have that are known for having block parties.
Yeah, schools.
Schools. There are senior residences. There's apartment buildings that are their own communities in their own way, and maybe don't think about it that way. There's even a group that probably meets at the laundromat.
Yep. We've even talked about cafes at Starbucks, so you know.
A cafe within a cafe.
A cafe within a cafe.
But that, again, has been the success for Starbucks and others like it, is that they understand, they make it accessible to people to sit down, have some sort of refreshment, not a major meal. It's not a big production.
Right. That's right.
But to read, to think, and let's go back to that first word you used, intellect, to have some intellectual exercise.
Great. We need it.
Well, what's your feelings? I have a pronouncement almost that every individual, and like you said, the littlest people have some of the greatest ideas or questions that start you really thinking about the future. But one of the blessings is most people arrive on the planet with intellect. That's the human gift we get. Some of us are not born into societies or cultures that maybe nurture that.
Right.
But you're talking about a world movement in a time that not only now has some wealth when every corner, but as you said, the internet and other things are making people communicate in ways they never could before because the socioeconomic and physical barriers of communication are being really knocked down quickly.
It's exciting. I think it's exciting.
So can we look at technology becoming, for instance, part of a cafe where maybe your table of 4 is also electronically connected to a table of 4 in Machu Picchu.
I'm new to World Cafe. I'm not an expert, but from what I understand, that is happening. There is a website called theworldcafe.com, and there's a book called The World Cafe. I'll show you that. Shaping Our Futures Through Conversations That Matter. And they do, on their website, there are so many different things happening that I haven't had a chance to educate myself. I went right to one of their blogs, which was Conversations That Matter, and that had to do with climate change cafes. So I've been focusing on that. I think what you're saying already exists, and I think people are talking to each other through this often, but I'm not 100% sure.
Well, I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of little electrons being indisposed or abused, maybe, for positive things. And I wanted to ask you one other question, is what's made you so passionate about the climate change?
When I moved here, I didn't have to work for the first time in my life. So it was a lot of time for reflection and a lot of time to explore what's important to me and areas I'd like to pursue. And I knew that I just needed to be, and I couldn't figure it out. I was stuck. I was paralyzed. So I knew I needed to at least take action. And if I took action, I'd move off this being stuck and the world would open up. And I took action in a few ways. One was I joined the Nevada Coalition for Climate Protection because it is an issue that is important. I'd heard they were meeting and I figured, what the heck, I'll go join and see where it takes me. And I did a few other things. I worked for VSA here in Reno a little bit, and I've taught art to special ed kids. I go to the senior centers now and teach a music, movement, and rhythm class to people in wheelchairs. So I'm doing a few different things. But once I got in with that group, I still wasn't feeling very passionate. I still was feeling despair. I still was feeling like, I don't think I'm not going to make a difference. This isn't working. Until I went to that experience in Nevada City, and it just turned. I did that and read Blessed Unrest, and it was a double whammy, and it just said, why not spend my time doing this? I certainly feel better about myself and the world while I'm helping and giving, rather than sitting here going, the world's going to end next week. So it works for me, and I'm able to be in service, which is really important to me as a person. So.
And that's probably a message for our viewers and listeners, is that if you're in a rut, if you're stuck,
give.
Well, give, and service is always wonderful, but here's a mechanism that's right here. And it's very encompassing, open and welcoming. You don't have to have any qualifications.
Right.
You don't have to know a lot about any particular subject.
Nope.
You just have to be willing to physically show up and engage in a conversation. And hopefully that conversation will unlock whatever is keeping you stuck.
Yes.
But again, I'm going to hit you a little bit hard. What was it about climate that had you so distressed?
I think we're in a tough situation on the world right now, and I do think if we don't take action, I mean, the planet has its own unfolding, and it might have a beginning, middle, and end for all I know, and it might be around after all the humans leave, the planet might still be here. But we are here now. We do affect the planet. We use its natural resources, and we're at the end of that. Whether you believe it or not, most scientists do believe that. So when there's no more oil, you're not going to have gasoline. When
there's no more water, what happens?
Yeah, exactly. Which, being here in Reno's, put a whole new appreciation for that subject. So I do feel that and the United States uses, we're this much of the planet, and we use this much of its natural resources. When you go out to outer space and take a photograph of the planet, there's America all lit up. Versus the other countries which aren't quite as lit up. So I feel that humans can make a difference, and we will have to change the way that we live. It doesn't have to happen yesterday totally, but it does have to happen. And I do believe in this theory of critical mass, that, first a couple people do it, and another couple people get electric cars, and another couple people get solar, and then Reno's putting out a green calendar, and the front, and you hit critical mass, and when you hit a critical mass, the change happens.
Well, think back, and you
So-
weren't here 10 years ago, but we have separated garbage.
Right.
Now, where was that ever thought of before? Some of us are trash artists, in other words, using things to recycle. Think of all the little things that have really slowly happened.
Littering, human right, feminine rights, that whole movement. Cigarettes. New York City, they don't smoke cigarettes in restaurants anymore. When I lived there, it was like, you gotta be kidding. There's no way this city is gonna say you cannot smoke cigarettes in the restaurants and bars. They wouldn't survive, but they do, and they did, and it's fine.
And people are talking about something else now,
Yes,
something else that they can change.
yes. Well, change, you're alive. If you don't change, you're static and you're not alive, so life is change.
Well, on that note, I'd like to thank you, because we could get terribly philosophical.
We
but have
could,
to
and that's my specialty,
and
so.
I'd love that. Come back, but
Okay.
you know, right now we're going to be out of time.
Okay.
Thank you for your energy. Thank you for bringing the Climate Cafe, and we hope that people will get excited about this and try the process or engage their communities. And as you said, there's this whole network that's really invisible. It's being built. It is there. So anybody that's feeling downhearted and depressed just needs to get out there.
I think so. Thank you.
Come back.
Okay.
All righty.